This week on The Grit Crusade.
Sometimes I think we can catastrophize our own situations, Like we take a problem and make it the biggest thing of the day when it's just one problem.
Hey, Grit Crusaders. I'm Brooke and your host here today on the Grit Crusade podcast, where we get real in the trenches of life, relationships, and business. And so if it's your first time, welcome. Today, it's just me and you. And for my returning guests, I'm so glad you spend each week with me as we dive into these topics that help us all become better people, better humans, and to leave a bigger dent on this world. So today, we're talking about leadership through crisis and leading through a crisis. And this can be in your businesses, your personal life, or in your homes as well. And so I'm going to talk from a place of business where most of my experience has been with crises, but it applies in so many ways. And so my hope is through the end of this podcast today, we can be able to look at situations and realize, is this an actual crisis or is this just a problem? Okay. So I think it's very important for me first to disclose that this has been a recent struggle of mine. So this isn't something, I'm talking to from a place of I've got it all figured out. This is I'm here in this with you and I feel you because I have been living this. And so today we're going to walk through a recent conversation that I had with my business coach, Ruthie, that shined so much light into dark places that I was having and looking at situations. Are they crises or is this actually just a problem? So as leaders, we are paid problem solvers, right? Like we are actually paid to figure out the solution to problems. As parents, we are granted the task and responsibility of solving problems for our children and for solving problems within our own homes. And so as paid or glorified paid problem solvers, we have to be able to look at the lens of each problem or situation that comes to us and be able to determine, is this a crisis or is it a problem? Because if it's a crisis, let's treat it like a crisis. But if it's just a problem, let's treat it like a problem. And so one of the things that my business coach and I were talking about is this concept of liberating truths. So many times we get into this mindset, into our own brains and our own thought processes of seeing things through just our lens and not allowing others to have a voice or even our rational selves to have a voice into those dark spaces where we're holding on so tight to the pending doom that's coming. And so as she and I were having a conversation, we were talking about some big changes that were happening within our businesses. Recent expansion we'd had with our youth recreational business, the loss of some key staff members. And in order to tackle this liberating truth idea, she said this sentence to me: what do I know is true without this problem? Okay. So every day we're going to have challenges and problems. We have to know that. We have to know that in life. We have to approach life with there's going to be problems. There's going to be issues. There's going to be things that come up. But what do I know is true outside of this problem? So I'll give you an example. So let's say that you've made a decision in your business or in life and it's not going well. Okay, does that make you a bad failure, terrible, upsetting, disappointing, all of those bad adjectives that you can come up with person? Or does it just mean that you didn't make the best decision in that situation and you are still a kind, confident, smart human? Because so many times we can project all of that onto ourselves when really we need to figure out what is true and what we already know true outside of this problem. So that liberating truth of being able to see the problem or the crisis for what it is and not to project that onto our whole lives and our whole beings. Because sometimes I think we can catastrophize our own situations, Like we take a problem and make it the biggest thing of the day when it's just one problem. And it's just one thing that we need to come up with a solution to. And we don't need to call everybody we know. We don't need to put all of our coworkers in the middle of it. We don't need to get everyone else upset. We just need to look at it through the lens of what do I know that's true about this situation or even outside of this situation? And what is the next best step? So being able to, is this a problem or is this a crisis?
And what do we know that's true about this situation? Because for me, what has been really hard in my journey with this is expecting the challenges. I am a recovering perfectionist. So I want everything to turn out good. I want everything to be a win. I want all the decisions to be right. And I struggle when it's not all right and when it's not all a win. Because I have to, and this is the statement I don't want to say, I have to realize that everything's not in my control. And sometimes bad things happen, even to good people. But it's so hard as a leader and as a type A person and as someone who wants to have control of everything. It's almost like that godlike tendencies. I think as humans, we all, in a way, desire to have the power and strength and control that God has, but we don't for a reason. And so realizing that some things are out of my control allows me to look at the crisis or the problem with a more clear lens, if that makes sense, right? So instead of realizing that, oh my gosh, this business is not doing as good as it once was, and it's losing revenue, and it must be a direct reflection of me. I must be an inequipped leader. I must not be smart enough. I must not be good enough. I must not have what it takes to make this happen. Instead of, okay, here's where we are. Is this a crisis? If it is, let's get our team together and get creative and figure out, kind of how to tackle it. Or maybe it's just a problem with this one classroom or this one department. Maybe this one department needs to work on a new strategy. So being able to take that big problem or crisis, if it is, and sometimes it is a crisis, and sometimes it needs to be treated like a crisis, and hone down on that and go, what do I know to be true about this? And how can I tackle this as a leader from the lens of truth? But as we all know, sometimes things don't work out as we plan them. And so what do we do when that happens? Because even the best laid plans don't always turn out the way we want them to. And sometimes the way we want them to is probably not how they need to turn out anyway. However, again, we want to be in control and we want to be able to have like that ultimate say-so in how things are going to go. And so we have this plan, but what happens when it doesn't work out? That's what we're going to tackle right after we do our Trivia in the Trenches segment. So if you're new, welcome to the podcast and the fun part of the episode. So it has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but gives us a little brain break as we transition through from basically the problem or topic we're tackling into what can we do about it or what is our solution. And so today's Trivia in the Trenches, are you ready? Here we go. What U.S. president coined the phrase good to the last drop? And he was talking about coffee. Theodore Roosevelt. Yay, I didn't know that either. But I might have guessed Roosevelt or Lincoln or somebody. Lincoln seems too stuffy, so I don't think he would say something like that. But Theodore Roosevelt was actually one of the most inventive and smart with it presidents we've ever had. He was, and here's some more fun facts about him. He was the first president to win the Nobel Peace Prize for brokering the end of the Russo, I hope I'm saying that right, it might be Russo, Russo, Russo-Japanese War in 1906. He had claimed that he had a photographic memory, so he was very, very smart, remembered everything, and because of that, he became a prolific writer. He wrote 36 books in his lifetime and penned over 150,000 letters. What? When did he have time to do anything else? He's also the father of the modern U.S. Navy, and he was blind. He became blind in one eye after a boxing injury at the White House, and then he quit boxing, I think it was about 1908, and started jiu-jitsu, which my son does jiu-jitsu, and so now I kind of know a little something about jiu-jitsu and that form of martial arts. So fun fact about Theodore Roosevelt, good to the last drop, and he was talking about coffee. And speaking of coffee, I don't know where you're listening from, but I would love it if you would drop it in the comments if you're on YouTube or if you are watching on a podcast, to shoot me a message at chat@brookeplack.com. Because where you're living, is there coffee shops popping up everywhere? Used to, I feel like a decade ago, right? there was just like Starbucks and maybe like a local coffee shop when you were somewhere, when we were traveling. And now there's like all these brands of coffee shops on every corner. And we're not even in a major metropolitan area. We are straight in suburbia over here, like Desperate Housewives style, I feel like, without like all the drama. Or maybe I just don't know about the drama. But anyway, so do you have coffee shops coming up everywhere? Because I feel like that we do. And another fun fact about coffee shops that's totally irrelevant to the topic today, but is fun, and here you are on the podcast, is Shaquille O'Neal was playing basketball when like the initial shareholders meeting was for Starbucks. And like he was playing basketball with this rich guy's son. Like he asked him to come play with him, like just come play ball and like occupy his son. And then the guy came out of the meeting, was like, hey, Shaq, you need to invest in Starbucks. And Shaq said, Black people don't drink coffee, but he invested in Starbucks. So yeah, see, coffee was a thing. Even Shaq knew back then. But he was like, I literally thought Black people didn't drink coffee because he had never seen anyone. So that kind of does tie into our lens of liberating truths, because we only see the world through the lens of what we know and what we've seen to be true. And sometimes those lenses are not true. Like they're unfactual, infactual. Unfactual, I think is how you would say that. But so if Shaq had tackled that situation through the lens of Black people don't drink coffee, because that's what he knew to be true growing up, he wouldn't have invested in that first big investment. And he is now like a prolific businessman and has amazing career outside of, the game of basketball. But it's just so important for us to be able to see things for what they are and not just what we feel in the moment. And I think I wouldn't be doing this topic service in this episode if I didn't talk about a little bit about the emotions tied to problems and crises. So this isn't even like something that's on my radar, in my notes, like anything. It's just something I feel like that we need to address before we move on to what do we do about it when things don't go our way. Because there is an emotional tie to every achievement or path to achievement that we're having in life, right? You get emotionally tied to opening in a business. You get emotionally tied to the success of your children. You get emotionally tied to, and all of these things I'm saying, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my hands, but if you're listening, I've got my hands like out in front of me. They're out of our control. And I am a recovering perfectionist saying that. So those things are all outside of us. So when problems and crises arise outside of us, we have to treat them like they are outside of us. We cannot control our spouses. We cannot control our friends. We can only control how we react to the situation. So we can't emotionally invest who we are into that problem. That doesn't mean we're not emotional about it and we don't have feelings and we shouldn't acknowledge them. But tying up our self-worth in the success or failure of a current project or problem is ill-advised, because when our emotions get involved, we aren't seeing things clearly. So we've been talking about leading through crisis, how we decide if something is a problem or a crisis. So a problem is something that we can come up with a solution for and get the next big step. A crisis might mean I need to bring my team in. I need to bring all the people in around me. We need to get creative. We need to try to solve this. I need more ideas than my own. Because in the episode before this, and we will link this in the show notes, what we talked about the struggle of loneliness and isolation as a leader. And part of that is when we're trying to go at it alone. We do not have to go at it alone. So a crisis might require bringing everyone in, but every problem is not a crisis, and we don't need to treat it that way. So when we're looking at what do we do when it's not gone the way we wanted it to, okay? And that has led to this problem or crisis. And we're in a leadership seat. We have to take a moment to reflect after we've come to this conclusion of, okay, now we've got to do something, and we've got to reflect. Because as leaders, so many times we just go, and keep pushing and don't take a chance to sit and learn the lesson. And so when I was talking to my leadership coach, Ruthie, I'm going to read you some of the thoughts that she gave me as I was working to lead through what I was viewing as crisis, but was actually just small problems that needed to be addressed along the way. Okay. So I'm saying these thoughts like they're my own, but they've actually learned these through the context of working with my business coach, which I talked about in the episode of struggling with isolation and loneliness as well as a tool to help you to not be there and stay there. So one of the things that she was talking to me about was, in business and in life, we get better at something by repetition, right? So we have to allow ourselves to make decisions, good or bad, and without judgment, because over time we repeat them and we get better, hopefully, right? We don't want to repeat mistakes, but as we make more and more decisions, we have to be able to do that without judgment. Allow ourselves to have the chance to try things over and over again and not be so hard on ourselves when one or two times it doesn't go wrong or doesn't go right. Because remember at the beginning of the episode, I talked about that, we have to know every day something unexpected is going to happen. It changes your whole mindset when you go into it knowing this is not going to be flawless. This is not going to be perfect. When I started this podcast, like if I go back and listen to my first episode and look at the lighting and the way the table was seated, and when I had my first guest and we were side by side and we were awkwardly looking at each other, like it was so silly that I thought that was a good idea then. But you have to practice at getting better and becoming more natural and becoming more in tune with things. And that is how we get good at stuff. But so many times we get so down and harsh on ourselves because it didn't go right the first or second time. But with repetition, we do get better. And knowing that you can look at that situation as, what can I learn from this? Okay. So it's not always just let's get it right. It's when we get it wrong. Like those are the mistakes that we're paying for that should yield dividends years to come if we take that reflection time that I mentioned just a minute ago. And when you look at these situations, and this is the most, and I'm going to use the word prolific again. I think I've already used it twice in this episode. I feel like I like that word, prolific. It like feels good coming off my tongue. You try it, say it, prolific. It like feels fancy. I don't know. But this is the most like mind-blowing thing that I had, like that happened in this conversation with Ruthie, is she said, you have a choice. So in a crisis and a problem, is this do or die? Or is this do or try? I'm going to say it again. Is this do or die? Or is this do or try? Because if it's a problem, it's not do or die. If I don't make the right decision, it's over. It's all over. It's all going to explode. It's all going to be done. But we can get ourselves into that mindset when we are looking at situations as crises rather than problems. And if something is a true crisis, we still have a choice on how we approach it. Are we approaching it as do or die, or are we approaching it as do or try, which means try to figure out the next best step, not the end game, not the end of the road, especially if you're emotional, but what is the very next easiest step that we can take to get closer to where we want to go. It may not solve all the problems. It may not fix your entire revenue deficit. It may not fix your entire operational hiccup. It may not change that this one customer is mad right now. But what's the next best step we can take to help get us in the right direction? Because it doesn't always have to be do or die. It can just be do or try. And this is like confession moment. Like, like on The Bachelor where they take the girls like off and then they get to sit and talk about the guy and like nobody else is around, or they talk about the kiss. Okay, this is my confession moment. All right, this is my like grit confession. That's what we should call it. We should call it grit confession. I like that. See, just came up with that on the spot. All right, so my grit confession is I tend to approach problems and situations as do or die because I'm a very intense, like all in, optimistic, let's do it. And when I'm not there, I'm like nowhere. Like this has to work. And if it doesn't, everything's over. Like, but that's not healthy. And that's something that my business coach helped me to shine light into. And so when you choose to give someone a voice in your life, and I don't want you to miss that verbiage that I just said, when you choose to give someone a voice in your life. Because everyone doesn't deserve a voice in your life, and you get to make that choice. That's a huge step in life. Then they can speak into those dark places where you are having these unhealthy thoughts and limiting beliefs about yourself. And they can speak truth into there and tell you things like, it's not do or die, Brooke. It's do or try. Or like she said, she asked me the question. She didn't give me the answer. She wanted me to figure out, is this do or die or is this do or try? Because it doesn't always have to be like your leadership journey doesn't have to be perfect. And you don't have to make all the right decisions. But what you do have to do is you have to learn from each decision you make, as in not just like what was right or wrong, but like, how could I do that better next time? Because truly, it's all just one big evolution. Like, you are not the leader today that you were 2 years ago. Thank God, right? And you're not leading the same team or people or organizations or ministry or household that you were 2 years ago. So you evolve with that, and allowing yourself to have permission and the space to evolve within that, knowing that every day something's going to be unexpected, right? Something unexpected is going to happen. It's still okay to evolve in that and to give yourself permission. Here's the key word: to try. You don't always have to have it right. So leading through crisis is not about getting all the right answers, but it is about figuring out that next best step, reflecting, and giving yourself permission to try again, especially when you don't get it right the first time, because so many times we don't, but we're all just human and we're all just learning. And it's okay to make mistakes as we go. And it is okay to learn and reflect from learn from ourselves and reflect on the journey as we move along this leadership path of leading through crisis, leading through success, and leading through problems. And knowing, again, that it's not do or die, but it's just do or try. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to The Grit Crusade. I'm Brooke Plack. Join me again next week on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. This podcast is produced by ClintonCreative.com.